Hello YouTubers, today we are going to do what I call Two Fields Walk. And there is our starting point. For those of you who want to follow in my footsteps, so to speak, head for Rhossili in the Gower. And when you reach this spot, which is a couple of miles, about 2 miles or so past the chip shop, as you turn off to onto the Rhossili road from the Portainen road, you will find this location. You can actually park just down by there. This is the road, and it's a very pretty place. Okay, there's our starting point. I call it Wayne's Two Field Walk. We'll come back to that title in a minute because there is some dispute over it. As I said when we started the walk, I call it Wayne's Two Field Walk. There is actually a bit of a controversy over my title. One of my friends, who shall remain nameless, Shirley, insists that it's not two fields, that it's 4 fields. In fact, she insists it very volubly. The problem is that it does actually appear to be more than 2 fields. She says, and it's a terrible slur on my character, that I am calling it a 2-field walk to make it seem less distance when my poor friends do the walk. She is, of course, wrong. It is in fact 2 fields that have been divided up and appear to be 4 fields. And this is where the plot thickens. You see, another one of my friends, John, who is in I think my first ever video, joined the fray. He insists that it is actually not 2 fields and not 4 fields. His argument is that it is in fact 1 field divided multiple times. And I have to admit, his theory does have some merit. So is it 2 fields? Is it 4 fields? Is it 1 big field? We'll let you decide. But I'm still calling it Wayne's Two Field Walk. So there you go. This is the first field, as you can see. And I'll come back to you when we reach the second field. Okay, now we've just come through into what some would argue is the second field, and we're going to carry on basically straight on ahead of us following that path. As you can see, it's a beautiful place, absolutely lovely. It's one of my favourite walks, honestly. Still in the second field. As you can see, I'm just going to pan around a little bit, show you the view. It's pretty cold out today, to be honest. When I come out it was about 2.5 centigrade, but it doesn't actually feel that cold out, if I'm honest. It's pretty chilly, but it's not doesn't feel sub-zero. Right, on with the walk through what appears to be the second field. Now I've reached a part, I'm still in what appears to be the second field. Can you hear that? That is the ice and frozen ground cracking under my weight. Now, a word of warning, I've passed a few ponds on the way down here. Indeed, there's some ice there. I don't know how. And in this sort of weather, people always go out playing on ponds and things, and it's absolutely lethal. It really is. The snow down there, that is quite beautiful. You only need to fall through the ice into a pond and you've got problems. Okay, now we've come to the end of what I suppose you could call the second field. Now the problem we have here is this. You see this dividery thing here, this ditch type thing. Now is this all here? Is this one field all the way down? Or is that one technically a second field? Or third field, I should say. And this is where the confusion lies. Right, I'll come back to you in a few minutes when we enter the third field. Okay, now we've come into what could be argued to be the third field. You can see the ditch properly there between the second field there and what some would argue is the third field. I would argue this is one field with a ditch. But that is definitely a matter of opinion. Right, let's carry on with our walk through the third field. Or call it whatever you like, really. I'm easy, it's just nice to get out in the fresh air and the snow. I've been pretty lucky actually down here. I live in South Wales, and this is pretty much the only snow. We had a little dusting of snow the other night, but the rest of the country is pretty much on standstill. And this is the only snow I've seen for, really, apart from about a half an inch on the roof of my car the other day. So this is it. Bit of frost on my lawn last night. Some places have had a right old clobber in now. Right, I shall come back to you when we get to the next boundary. Well, we are still in what some would argue is field 3, and what I would argue is field 2, and what John would argue is still part of field 1, divided up. Well, yeah, I'll leave you decide how many fields it is, but it is, oh look at that, it's a lovely day to get out. I've just spotted those sort of rut things leading to those trees, absolutely gorgeous. What a lovely day to get out. I'll come back to you when we get to that next boundary down there. Speak to you in a bit. Well, I don't know if you can see me okay there, but we are still out. It's actually warming up right up now. This hat is going to be coming off in a minute. I'm trying to keep myself in frame and walk on somewhat icy, slippery ground. Honestly, it is just such a lovely day. It's so nice to get out. I haven't been out for ages. If I pan around a little bit, I don't know how well you can see behind me. I have got a video light on the camera, but I don't think it's making much difference in this bright sunlight. Anyway, on with the walk. At this rate, we're never going to get to the coast. This path, incidentally, leads out to the coast. So, there we go. Okay, we've reached the boundary of what I call field 2 and field 3, and what others would argue is actually the boundary between field 3 and field 4. It's getting quite wet now, to be honest, the ground is. That is awfully muddy. Oh, bloody hell, that's muddy. This is actually very, very muddy here. I don't know who designs these things, but they don't seem to take into account the fact that you might have a backpack on when you try to come through. Okay, and this is what many would argue is field 4. But is it? Is it really? I mean, that looks suspiciously like the same big field that's been divided up to me. Anyway, for the sake of argument, we'll call this field 4, which is actually a very short field, isn't it? Because it's only about 50 yards across at this point. So we'll walk to the boundary of field 4. And now we reach another boundary. Now the question here is, is this field 5, in which case everybody's wrong, except John, who said it's one field divided up. That's apparent. Or is this actually the top of the coastal path, which is further down by there? You can probably just about see the sea down by there now. Anyway, let's not worry too much about how many fields it is. Let's just enjoy the walk. Right, I'm going to put the camera away for a second now until I get a bit closer to the coast, or until we get to the end of this field. And I shall leave you guys debate how many fields it is. Right, catch you in a minute. Oh, bloody hell, that was slippery. Right, see you in a bit. Okay, we've reached the boundary of what I suppose, well, what most people would probably be considered to be field 5. And this is now the boundary of what some of you would argue to be field 6. I'm not sure if this, although I suppose that is technically a field up there, this is more part of the top of the coast, top of the coastal edge. But I'm sure some of you would argue it is in fact. It is in fact field 6. Because there is actually a field of sorts up there, and there is a fence dividing it. Anyway, I am gonna, this is really muddy by here and really slippery, so I'm gonna negotiate this. Yeah, it's got past the worst of it. And now I'm gonna make my way down. As you can see, the path is starting to drop down, with my hand, starting to drop down there into the valley to reach the actual cliff tops and coast itself. So I'll come back to you when we get a bit lower down. Okay, we've reached the end of that, I suppose you'd call it a field, which is 5, or was that 6 fields? I can't remember, I think that was 6 fields. Anyway, sod it. This is where the fields now really join company with what's called the coastal path. As you can see, that drops down to a small rocky cove down there, which we'll take a look at from the top later on. And the path itself goes across there. You can either cross over the stile, where is it, on there, and go up the other side there and along the cliff tops to Rhossili that way, or you can go up there's a path by here, which is the one we're going to go up, and that takes you along to Pwtainen the other way eventually. It's a good walk along to Pwtainen from here. Well, it's a fair walk to Rhossili, but it's not half as far as it is to Pwtainen. Right, well, when we get up on the top of the cliffs we'll come back again. Okay, we've reached the top of the cliffs now, after I walked through however many fields that was. And coming up was a little bit tricky because it's actually really quite slippery, and the path there itself is frozen in places and it's really quite steep and quite smooth, so it's a little bit of a tricky climb up. There's the actual bay itself down there, and if I zoom in, which is going to be somewhat jerky because I've left my sort of smooth focusing gadgety thing in the house. That's the actual little stony beach, which is very pretty. Now around the top of these cliffs in various places, all the way along here in fact, there are loads of little caves and potholes. Dozens of the things. If you go on the internet and search for the caves of Gower or potholes in Gower or something along that line, you'll find there's a website dedicated to them that lists some of all the details and map references and everything. Some of them are a little bit tricky to get to. There is at least one cave down there, which is kind of on the back of this bit here, which is a bit tricky to get at. I've tried reaching it before, but I had very slippery boots on that particular day, and I actually chickened out, because if you fall off the bottom there's about a 50-foot drop onto rocks, and I didn't fancy half a day out with the Undertaker. So, but this is basically the view along from here. So what we're going to do now, we're going to walk along the top of the cliffs for a little ways and see what we can see. I think I need to buy one of these camera stabilizer-y gadgety thingies, don't I? Trouble is, I'm told that they're a bit of a pain to set up. They have to sort of be calibrated to the camera and lens and everything, and I'm not quite sure how complicated that is going to be. There's another view down on the little beach. As you can see, we've reached the top of the cliff. It's quite a rocky little beach there. Possibly these coves and things may have been used by smugglers in the past. Certainly there is a bay not too far from here, a couple of miles along the coast, called Smugglers Cove, or Brandy Cove I should say, and that has definitely been used by smugglers in the past. I'll do a 360-degree pan so you can see basically what I'm saying. And it's going to go a bit glary now because the sun is right low there. And there we go, back round. You can see the thing, back round to the cliffs. There we go. And onwards and upwards, as they say. Okay, well I found somewhere to stop. On top of the cliffs, I'm going to, half an hour by now, I'm going to have a Mars bar and a drink. A little bit of blood sugar back in and a little bit of energy back in. And then we're going to probably turn around and make our way back to the car, because I've got maybe 45 minutes drive home from here as well. This is fairly local to me, but I don't live right by it. I'm fairly lucky really. I kind of live in between the coast and the mountains really, so I can go either way. I can go up the Brecon Beacons one way, or I can go down to the Gower Coast the other way. So I'm pretty lucky in that respect. So crack on folks, it's Mars bar time, and nothing waits for a Mars bar. I shall speak to you later. Thank you for joining me on this walk too. I've just spotted something down there I'm going to take a look at through the camera now, because there is something shining down there. I'm not quite sure what it is. I'll get back to you. As you can probably hear, the wind is starting to get up now, and it's starting to get quite chilly out here now. I've been out here, I've had a nice little relax, I've chilled out very nicely. I need to get out and do this sort of thing. I just don't get the chance all the time, unfortunately a lot of the time. So I can actually feel the stress flowing out of my body, which is nice. So I'm going to turn around now and start making my way back. I've had a Mars bar and a nice drink, and I'm going to start making my way back to the car now, then the drive home, and then I've got to go shopping and get something for tea. So thank you very much for joining me on Wayne's two-field walk. Alright, maybe just a hint more than two fields, but what the heck, we're all friends here. So thank you for joining me on Wayne's two-field walk. Until next time, take care.